Oh, welcome everyone. I'm delighted to see you here today, joining us for our second session, seminar session. And today what we're going to be doing, if I can get to the next slide, we're going to have a presentation from Mr. Michael Shelmet, who is the Director of Instructional Technology, and he is going to speak on the session, which is Work with What You Have, Maximizing Technology Resources. Now, Mr. Shelmet is the Director of Instructional Technology within Drexel University's Information Technology Department. He started at Drexel in 2003, working at the help desk, and quickly transitioned to the first full-time learning management system support role. And over the 2 years, Michael was a system administrator for our self-hosted version of the learning management system, Blackboard, for the entire institution. In his time at Drexel, Michael has received master's degrees in both computer science and software engineering, and is currently pursuing his doctorate in EDD in educational leadership and management. So without further ado, I'm going to stop my share and turn the controls over to Michael.
Thank you for that. So I would say good morning, but I believe it's a good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Shelmet. As Fran said, work with what you have, maximizing technology resources. I'll be presenting today. My colleague, Jeffrey Berman, who's the Assistant Director of Instructional Technology, will be joining us in a little bit. I put together a couple slides, but what I'd really like to do is during this session, I'm going to be making some recommendations based on some of the feedback I got, some of the things that I was told you wanted to hear about and look at, but make sure as we're going through, raise your hand, interrupt me to ask questions. I'm a very informal when I do sort of presentations like this. I'd much prefer that we have an interaction, and let me know if I'm making a suggestion, if it won't work for you and why it won't work, so we can sort of tease out a way to either make that work or to say, okay, well, that's not a viable option for you all. So I tried to focus on 4 sort of areas of interest for the presentation: staffing in terms of what you can do with the staffing resources you have; infrastructure, talking about some of the software and systems you might have access to or utilize; bandwidth and considerations about maybe a lack of bandwidth or the idea that some students might have more limited bandwidth, and then kind of touch on accessibility and how that might play a role in helping with some of these other issues. So I think before we even get started, the one thing that's really important is communication. It's critical to the success of any sort of endeavor. As I explained to my daughter repeatedly, 99.9% of problems that occur, I think, with humans is a problem with miscommunication. And so being very clear and transparent about what you're doing is important. So you want to make sure you set the expectations for yourself, for the faculty, for the students, so that they know, sort of what they're getting into. I also think you should provide details about the different systems that you're going to be using, the different software, how faculty and students can access them and use them, and then make sure to advertise widely where and how to get technical support. So when you're dealing with technology, there are always problems. And so knowing where and how to get help is sort of really key. So in terms of staffing, one of the things that we found within our team in order to best leverage everyone's time and resources is to create sort of on-demand modules for users. So generally what we do here is we will identify some of the most common issues and questions that users are facing, and then create step-by-step documentation from that to sort of get people through that. So for example, simply logging into the system. How do we get into our learning management system, and how do we log in? We provide step-by-step documentation for that. That's again, openly, publicly accessible on the web, so that no one needs credentials in order to get to that information. And where appropriate, we provide images and screenshots to sort of visually illustrate how that process would work. Again, as I said, they're publicly accessible, so they're readily available. These are things that you typically don't want to put behind any sort of account or access restrictions. The way I typically look at information of that sort is to say, if it's not going to hurt everyone in the world from accessing it, if it's not sort of secret Drexel proprietary information, and this is just a simple, well, this is how you use system X, I don't see the reason why you wouldn't just put it out on a public facing website. And then again, in other instances where necessary, you would provide sort of a video walkthrough. So some people are really good reading instructions and following step by step, especially if there's visuals there. Other people would prefer to see a video of that. You create those videos, typically using something like Screencast-O-Matic, which is a free screen capture software. There are other ones out there. That's just one of a myriad of solutions you could use, and then basically step them through the process of doing that. I think in terms of bandwidth considerations, which I'll get into a little bit later, it would depend on how you want to sort of share that video out. It could be uploaded to YouTube, and then people could stream it from YouTube. However, if it's something that they might want to watch more than one time, creating a smaller downloadable version of that might be best, because then they're downloading it once and then it's on their computer for them to repeatedly rewatch, whereas they're not using the bandwidth every time they want or need to stream the video. And I don't know if I should stop and just say, does that make sense? Does that work? After each recommendation, I see Peter nodding his head, so I'll take that as confirmation that we're good to go. I think another important thing is, and this is one of the things we also try to do, is sort of cross-train staff and faculty. So again, you're starting with identifying the most common issues and questions, and then you make sure that all of the faculty and staff who would have interactions with students or anyone who would have those issues sort of know about them. Again, you can, as I say here, you can direct them to those self-paced user modules where they go through. But again, to sort of I don't want to say it's train the trainer, because that's not what this is. It's sort of a let's make a baseline of all of the common things that come up. Again, basic accessing of systems, what systems are available. These are common issues with these platforms, and so here are the common fixes. I think simply knowing how to clear your browser's cache is sort of like the #1 go-to. That's sort of like the turn it off and turn it back on of the web age. And then this essentially allows you, if you're the sole technical person at an institution, to sort of deputize other people to help you address those issues. There's some trade-off there. Not everyone's going to want to know those things, but if they contact you about that problem and you help them with it, then they kind of know the answer and then would hopefully be able to provide that. So again, it's sort of setting those expectations to say, if someone comes to you for this question and you can answer it, do that rather than putting that burden back on me, the one person who has to deal with all of the issues of the institution, technical issues. One of the things we have at Drexel is a ticketing system. And so when someone has an issue, they send in an email, it creates a ticket, and then we use that to sort of triage the problem with them until it finally comes to a resolution. There are some free versions of ticketing systems, but it's still sort of a non-trivial task to set one of those up and maintain it. So I think one of the simplest things to do would be to create a spreadsheet to track your issues. This could be done in a Google Drive Sheets file. This could be done in an Excel file in a free Microsoft Online account. And then essentially in there, you're going to create a table to track your issues. I'd recommend designating sort of categories so that you have groupings of tickets. So if people are having issues with their hardware, a webcam's not working, a microphone's malfunctioning, something like that, that would be one classification of issue. A software issue where you're asking them to install a specific application on their computer and there are certain issues around it. Again, track those issues with wireless, networking, bandwidth, etc. all those things, create those classifications so you can have those to group tickets as you go forward. And then as the issues come in, and again, I don't know if they're going to contact you via email, phone call, text message, they're going to tweet at you, however they get in touch with you, sort of track that interaction as a row in the sheet. So log the date that the issue occurred. I don't know that the time is necessarily relevant, but at least if you know the day, that would be good. Who the user was, and again, identify them by first and last name, user ID, some sort of unique identifier where you know, okay, this is the person who contacted me. A short description of the issue, again, Wi-Fi not working, website not loading, something along those lines. Whatever the resolution was, so whatever you did to fix the issue. So again, you can sort of have those then issue solution pairings. And along with that, the resolution date. So if it took you, 2 days, 3 days, 10 days to fix it, at least again, what issues are more involved and took time. And then you could also see over time, if the same issues come up, how much quicker you are able to get to a resolution. And then sort of, again, any additional notes to say, this student was running Linux, and so that caused a lot of the issues because a lot of the things we're using aren't supported by that, as an example. This gives you tracking issues. There's sort of a trade-off there. So when you're tracking issues, you're taking your time out of your workday to then sort of make these notes. Our ticketing system isn't the most responsive thing, and there's a lot of fields you have to fill out. And so just creating a ticket feels time consuming. But what you get in the end is, again, this idea of issues over time, so that you can see, okay, well, over time, we've had a lot of Wi-Fi issues, but we created these modules that kind of go over the general setup, and we've seen them decrease over time. Or there was a new update to Chrome, and then we saw this spike in issues with this conflict, and then those all went away because they came out with a fix. It allows you to sort of see those trends, and with those trends to sort of make the recommendation, say, look at all of the work I have to do by myself in supporting this institution with all the technical issues. And look at the wide range of them. And then you can specifically make recommendations, say, well, we're having a lot of issues here. We could use these resources or hire a new staff member to do this, handle this specific thing, because there's sort of a capacity need for that. And then again, in terms of staff transition, if someone new were to come on staff, or you're promoted and someone takes your place, then they can have that to look back and maintain and see, okay, well, this was the trend of the issues and how they went, and sort of where we see them going. And again, not ideal to track it in a spreadsheet, but also not the worst thing. You can create tabs you could have a one sheet for a year and then create a tab for every month, and then sort of have a calculated tab that does sort of those metrics for you to say, well, of all the tickets we got per month, here's the ones that were categorized as hardware or software or Wi-Fi. And again, sort of see those trends and where they're heading. And again, it's just good sort of reporting and data and metrics to have, not only for yourself, but for supervisors to request more resources. So those are sort of the ones around staffing. Infrastructure I'm using as a sort of like in quotes. I think infrastructure generally speaks to servers and things you have on campus. And because there are so many things available in the cloud these days, that's generally not always the case. And so this is more about just some of the systems you might utilize. So Google Classroom was mentioned as an option for a learning management system that a lot of faculty might be taking advantage of, probably because it's free. That's really good because it provides a common space for the students to work together, to submit assignments, to engage in discussions, to upload files. It's also a great central place for the faculty to share files to the students. It also provides from the faculty member a communication mechanism to the students to ensure that they're all sort of getting on the same page and having the same information. So it's not a I guess as a counterexample, one way to communicate with a class would be to send emails. So you send an email to everyone on the list and everyone gets the email. Sort of the issue with sending an email versus, say, making an announcement in a Google Classroom is if you send the email, then all the students who are currently in there get it. And if a student adds later, the faculty member would need to know, oh, I need to send that out. Or that student just doesn't have that information. Whereas it's posted an announcement in the class, then it's always there for all the students to see. If they miss an email notification that something new is there, they can still go into the class to see it. And it sort of maintains that running log of the communication of the classroom. I think one of the burdens this then added is administrative, where, and we don't use Google Classroom. And so I'm not sure about how it's structured on the back end, but someone's going to need to create the courses. Someone's going to need to add the students. And I don't know who would be in charge of maintaining that, if every faculty member is sort of on their own to do that, or you all would be sort of the central place to look at your student information system and say, well, we have X number of courses running this term. We're going to create all those courses. We're going to put all the instructors in. We're going to put all the students in, and someone's sort of maintaining that list of courses and enrollments within the system on behalf of the faculty. Again, here at Drexel, we have an automated integration that runs hourly between our student information system and our learning management system to make sure all the new courses are there and all the enrollments for both of the instructors and the students are kept up to date. So again, it can work as a good repository, but it adds some administrative burden, if you will, to that. And again, just I guess just to get some feedback, does that use of Google Classroom make sense for your scenarios in general? No. Does it work sometimes?
Thank you, Michael. In my experience, it generally works most of the time, except when you have issues with connectivity.
Okay.
But I find it, that's maybe personally, I find it a little bit not as flexible as Zoom for classroom, sharing your screen and being able to pull up a whiteboard and make some notes while having the class.
Understood. That was so. Yeah. I want to make sure when I'm talking about Google Classroom, that's more of the like a physical class structure, and when we're talking about Zoom, Google has Google Meets, which I think is the synchronous part, like the web conferencing piece, which is free, and I don't think it has as many features as Zoom does. But I also don't know. I know with a free Zoom account, you're limited in how much time you can actually interact. And I think in the ways you can record. I did, in preparation for this, take a look at Google Meets because I wasn't that familiar with it. It does actually have a live captioning option as well, which again is great for students who maybe they're having audio trouble with their system. If they turn on the live captions, they can at least see what people are saying and at least get that one-way transmission of the synchronous session. Peter?
Yeah, Mike, thanks a lot. The issue, I've actually had the opportunity of using the Google Classroom for over a year to manage the e-learning process. I think the biggest challenge with the classroom is the administrative part, to actually get the students register and get their names on each of the classes. So it's really a big challenge. And if you really have to do that, then you have to do some kind of integration using Google APIs and things like that to automate that process. So the real challenge is how do you get registered students into the respective classes? If not, you just need to give the students the codes to join the classroom, which is really a security loophole because those codes could be shared among students, even out of the institution. So that's the biggest challenge I found with the Google Classroom.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, I don't have a lot of experience with Google Classroom, and I don't know if as an institution, you can sort of register with Google to say, we're going to be a Google Classroom school. Yeah. And then that would allow your faculty and your students to have sort of Google accounts that are associated with the school so that you can do that more tightly coupled thing. Because you're absolutely right. Sending codes or even just saying, oh, well, I'll just send this to your personal Gmail account. One, that does introduce a security risk. And two, it's sort of, some people don't like it when their worlds blend like that. Like, this is my personal account and this is my school account. And I want to keep them separate. I don't want them to be the same thing. I don't want other students and my faculty to know my personal email address. So that is a consideration as well.
Yeah, I think Google has a G Suite which is more advanced. I think for institutions, they can go in for the G Suite. Just that the G Suite, you need to do some paperwork, and sometimes you may not get the approval to have that package. But I think the G Suite is more for universities and institutions. It's customized for that. But with a free account, you can not really have something which is centrally managed. So your data sometimes just loiters in the space, and you cannot really know which student is doing on the platform, or how to manage the courses in the central pool. So the courses are more or less housed with the faculty, and you as a central administrator cannot lay hands on those courses because they are created independently, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Again, and thank you for bringing up this sort of privacy and security concerns as well, something that I hadn't planned on touching on. So I appreciate you raising those, because they're also important as well. And like you said, going through the paperwork, it might not be approved and things like that. I also, since we're talking about it, we're in a Microsoft campus. We have, Microsoft 365 and all of that. And I know that Microsoft also has free accounts, and they also have tools for education. I just don't know if, like Google's, you can get it for free. But again, it's, there's sort of a number of options out there. So thank you for that. Thank you for that interaction. One of the things, when we're talking about infrastructure, is sort of how are faculty creating assets? How are you creating assets? And audio and video recordings are things that are typically needed or desired for lectures and things like that. So when it comes to audio recording, there's a free program called Audacity that's freely available. That's one of the things I use to create audio files if that's what I need to use. And for video recording, there's a ton of, if you're just doing sort of a webcam recording, there's a bunch of built-in apps directly into both PCs and Macs to just record your webcam. There's, again, Screencast-O-Matic, which I mentioned before, to do sort of a lecture screen capture to track what it is you're doing, again, to make a demonstration of this is how you use this system, or this is how you log in. Again, I don't know. Again, at Drexel, we license Camtasia for faculty and staff, which is sort of it has a steep learning curve, but it has a whole sort of video editing suite on the back end. But I was also this weekend playing with Microsoft's built-in video editor, which allows you to sort of split clips and change speeds and do some things. It's again, not as fully featured, but it's better than just doing a recording and having that awkward moments at the beginning and the end where you're clicking record and then getting everything set, and you can at least chop those bits off to make it look a little nicer. So in terms of bandwidth, just in general, there are different ways to conserve bandwidth. And again, I'd be interested to see what might be useful here. So one of the first things that came to mind was just USB flash drives. You can get flash drives that are, almost half a terabyte now for relatively inexpensive. So you have a massive amount of storage and a tiny little device that is sadly then easy to lose. And so that also can pose some security issues. But again, it's relatively inexpensive. It's also reusable. So one of the things that I was thinking, and again, I wouldn't know exactly how this would work, but if you had a USB drive that you got one for every student, it could be preloaded with videos and content, either general tech support type things, or you could even, if the faculty members have it in advance, preload a whole course or semester's worth of data on there to share out. Again, this means that the students don't have to download all of those things and eat up their bandwidth. Especially when it comes to videos, you can provide the largest, highest quality videos, and it's not going to affect the students' ability to get that. And then one of the things I was thinking was if you had these drives, you could actually have sort of the student services arm of the institution go out and deliver them to the students as sort of a like meet and greet thing, or when students came to campus, just be part of sort of a welcome package to say, well, hey, here's a flash drive. This is the stuff it has on it. You can use this, for, throughout your tenure here. And then that's sort of one way to minimize it. I don't know how geographically dispersed the students are. I know that at Drexel, even with the online students, there's a large majority of them live in sort of the greater Philadelphia area. So they're actually not far, and making a trip to campus wouldn't be totally out of the picture. I just, again, I wasn't sure if that's even something that would be possible. So I'm just curious in terms of flash drives, physical media like that, knowing their security concerns, but again, going with that idea of this is content that they can have access to. Would those even make sense?
That was something that we had discussed a bit a while back about having offline content like that. What does the group think?
We can always come back to it.
Well, I was just waiting to see, because I think it's Michael, it's a pretty very common aspect of learning, of sharing materials back in Cameroon, where students often have their flash drives and they get materials. Teachers do PowerPoint presentations and then they slot in their flash to pick them up. And I think it's a very nice way of thinking about saving data, and to talk about I mean in the real exclusively online system, maybe it's difficult to reach out to the students to give them the flash drive, but in our system, I think most often it would be a situation where it's a blended approach where you have the students sometime they have to come to campus at the early beginning of the course, and then which makes it easier, if they have materials that have already been prepared, they could give them in a flash drive and then they go away. But the other thing too is to think about losing the flash drives, as we said, and sometimes viruses, so but I think it's one plausible solution that flash drives could really cut down the bandwidth that is needed.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and it's one of the things where, you have to always be wary of nefarious actors, viruses and things like that. Even if they weren't preloaded, if the students are coming to campus, and it was mentioned that there are some computer labs that, while classes aren't in session, can be used by the students. If there were computers where the students could go and take an empty flash drive and plug it in and just download everything while they're on campus that they need, that way you wouldn't have to preload things and they sort of are only getting what they need if they want it. That would also lead to sort of an idea where the faculty member could sort of package up the content into one downloadable zip file and say, okay, we'll just download this one file, and then when you extract it, you have everything. So again, to just sort of make it easier for the students. That's another thing that you could do. So when we're talking about bandwidth considerations, one of the other things that really comes up is sort of what we're doing right now, a live synchronous session. This is pretty bandwidth intensive, especially when you have a number of video feeds and you're sharing screens and things like that. So you might have sessions where during the synchronous session, you're only using audio, so no one has their video feeds on. Maybe you could put a picture up. I don't even know if I do this. See, at least you could see my picture here in the video, even though it's not me talking. You at least get a sense of what I look like. But then hopefully I can turn my video back on and it won't crash. Oh, look at that! It didn't. Sorry, I've been having problems with that recently. So you could do that. Again, that would save on bandwidth to only be broadcasting the audio. If students are having issues with that, they could also, if it's possible, they could call into a session. Most Zoom sessions and other web conferencing systems have phone numbers that can be dialed into to make those sort of connections. If the faculty member was doing a screen share, then they might, instead of screen sharing, say, okay, everyone has downloaded, PowerPoint 3, we're going to start with slide 3 and I'm going to talk to that. And everyone just sort of has it open on their computer. So again, you're not doing the screen share, sending bandwidth that way. That can be a little dicey because if someone's not paying full attention and they don't advance a slide, they're looking at the wrong thing at the wrong time. So again, everything's a trade-off. And then, just use text chat. So again, if the student was having audio issues, they could turn on live captions. That is a feature that was rolled out in Zoom recently. If you have the latest client, I believe it needs to be turned on for the meeting, but again, it's also available in the Google Meet. So if you have the closed captions, and even if I can't hear anything, I can read the captions and then I can text chat. So I can still interact in a synchronous way, albeit sort of from a distance. I think these are synchronous sessions are far more, are a lot trickier to deal with in terms of bandwidth, I think, than anything else, just because of the live nature of them. I guess just quickly, are most of you using Zoom as the web conferencing platform of choice, or do you have others that you're using?
I think Zoom and Google Classroom are the most popular, I think.
That makes sense.
Yeah, there's something called a big blue button plugin, which works with the Moodle platform. Big blue button.
Right. Yeah, no, it's I know that I haven't had a lot of experience, but colleagues here at Drexel have said that when they were trying to use Zoom to connect to a certain international location, it wasn't working as well. And then we have Blackboard Collaborate, which is another web conferencing system that integrates from our learning management system. And however that was negotiating, the bandwidth was better. So again, it's also one of those things where what's best for the students. So while Zoom might be the most fully featured platform that the faculty could take advantage of, it might be the case that Google Meet, because it runs right from the browser, is actually kind of does a better job of downsampling and using less bandwidth than a full Zoom session. And so that might actually be better for the students, especially if they're on a plan that doesn't provide them as much bandwidth during a day.
This, I think, I just want to just jump in here. This is something I think administrators would have a lot of influence on. We're talking about the bandwidth, and synchronous class meetings is about being purposeful about the synchronous session and the use of the synchronous session. It should not be utilized to deliver a lecture. which could be completed asynchronously, saving the bandwidth, perhaps even being in, prepared in advance and on the flash drive that the students take with them, so they can view that offline. And then when you meet synchronously, use that purposefully to engage and discuss and interact. I think that's something that you as leaders can influence.
I would agree. Yes. So going from synchronous sessions, there are ways to hold sort of asynchronous video conversations. And I think, again, the issue with that is how large are the videos they're downloading, what are sort of the bandwidth, considerations there. But essentially to say, if the faculty member records a lecture in advance that can then be streamed or downloaded, that would be one option. And then the students could record and upload to share their own video responses. So again, it would be very specific to say, well, here's the discussion we're going to have. What's your take on this? And then everyone uploads their response, and then students can respond to one another. There's a system called Flipgrid, which is freely available. It was purchased by Microsoft. That's one you can use that would allow you to sort of allow the faculty, I should say, to set up a one of these sort of video discussions to pose a question and ask for student responses. And then again, students can review and submit video comments or text comments to that. I think in a lot of asynchronous discussions, when it's just text-based, there might be a reason that you do that because you're testing the students, writing skills and things like that. I think there's another avenue of it where you want to see how they would respond, because in an online environment or in a situation like we are now where we're sort of forced to be remote, you want to hear how the student would respond, or you're asking them to give a presentation. And so actually that video and audio response is more appropriate than the plain text version. And again, I'm not sure how well that sort of thing would work. I think Flipgrid is minimal on bandwidth needs in that regard. But again, it sort of breaks things up. And then I think the last thing, I think it's the last thing with bandwidth is sort of just video and the size. So if you're recording a full screen PowerPoint presentation and they need to see an intricate diagram and details in there, reducing the video quality is probably a bad idea, because then they're going to lose details. They're not going to be able to see things, and they're not going to get what they need. If it's kind of just a talking head, and it's just me giving a lecture and telling them to, again, follow along with their PowerPoint file, well, then you could probably reduce that to a smaller, almost thumbnail size video, because you don't really need to see my face in high definition. And so you can reduce that. There's a tool that we sort of use to re-encode video files. It's called Handbrake. Again, like Audacity, it's freely available. And so you basically, if you have an MP4 that you recorded from your webcam, and if your webcam is recording at 1080p, you can run it through Handbrake to reduce it to a 720p or a 480p video to then streamline it down. Thank you for the link. I also would think if you're uploading videos to YouTube, then again, it's sort of one of those technical things to make sure the students know, like, hey, here's where you click on the little gear icon and change the bandwidth to 480. And then if that's good enough for you, then that's great. And if it's not, you can throttle up or down. I think YouTube by default is set to, doing whatever's best for the bandwidth. So if it could handle the high definition one, it'll send that, and that sort of goes against your desire to save the students on their bandwidth. So this is actually, I think, sort of the last thing I have to touch on, which is just in terms of accessibility, there are a lot of things, and we should all be making our digital content as fully accessible as possible. But I think one of the things that can benefit students most is just closed captions on videos. And so if you have a video, it should be closed captioned. If you upload a video to YouTube, automatic captions will be generated, and that's great. I think that gets you started, but I think it's also really important that someone's going in and making sure that those captions are accurate, that they say what you want them to say. I know that before in automatically generated captions, I'll say my name, Michael Shelmet, and it was at one point translated to Michael, I'm a brunette, which was true once a long time ago, but not really so much anymore. And so you just want to make sure that having automatically generated captions is good, but if they're not accurate, they can do more harm than good. Again, this provides access to the content if students are having audio issues. So if a student's speakers or headphones aren't working, they can still watch the video and read along with it. It's also good in instances where they're in a public space or they can't turn their volume up because they only have speakers and there's a number of other people, and so they can only read the captions. And then if you just have a plain old transcript, this all the audio from the text in a text, all the audio from the video in a text file, that can also be really helpful for students to just sort of go through and read along with what was there. So that was actually my last slide. I tried to, again, sort of touch on a breadth of things, and what I'd like to do is ask you all, what of my recommendations do you think are, I just ask for your feedback. What didn't I cover that you'd like me to talk about? What did I cover that seems like it might really work? I'd like to give the last 15 minutes to sort of a more interactive conversation on what would best meet your needs.
Thank you, Michael. On the last slide, we were talking about videos and maybe using a software that allows you to have auto captions. One of the challenges we have is the accent. When you use auto caption without accent, you don't usually get the words that are the words you are speaking. So I've always wondered how you deal with that. If you don't want to change your accent or learn how to speak in another accent.
Yeah, no, I don't. That is an excellent point.
Just as I'm talking right now, you can see when I say accent, you said acid.
Right, and again, I think automatically generated captions are getting much better. I think one day the accent won't matter, and it will actually, within context, get what you're saying. I think there's a couple of things you can do there. One, if the captions are so off, then it's almost more trouble to try and fix them than to just start from scratch. That would be the first thing. Like, don't even bother with the automatic captions if it's really off. I think the other thing is specifically with sort of faculty and video lectures is if they're using a script, like if they type out the words that they're using, then there are programs that will sort of take that text and match it up with the video to give you 100% proper capitalization, proper punctuation, proper spelling of technical terms, captions, so that you write the script, you read from the script, and then you use that script as the transcript and the captions, and then you're set. You're at 100% right out the gate. Not always the case.
Excellent.
Oh,
I was just going to say that's excellent. There are also free tools that will present the text to you on the screen. So you just read it as you're talking, so it makes it easier for the faculty to follow the script and look like they're not reading a piece of paper that's on their desk.
Yeah, it's sort of a trick where you take the file and you line it up just below the camera and you sort of shrink it down so your eye space is only so far, and you use the wheel mouse to, scroll it as you go, and then you're reading. And if you're looking just a little bit down, it still looks like you're pretty close. But yeah, the teleprompter applications can really help with that. Yeah, until the AI gets better for the auto generate captions. I mean, I have to go through it and it misses words I say, a lot. So probably not as often.
I want to just circle back to that last slide because Mabo, you brought that up. The accessibility piece of it is important to consider for universal design for learning, for students who have different learning styles and would benefit from being able to read the text or seeing the content in an alternative format. So it's not just for individuals who are blind or have a disability, but it's for really creating from the beginning your content so it can be accessed from different perspectives and different learner preferences. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. That's something, again, for the leaders of an e-learning initiative to consider, start thinking about how to move forward.
Yeah, I can, one of the other things in terms of accessibility that I've seen recently is this tool called Beeline Reader. And again, when we're talking about the different learning styles, this is something that there's a plugin for Chrome that you can use for free, sort of. And the idea behind Beeline Reader is the text on the screen will start in one color. So here it's black, and then it goes to blue, and then the blue transitions to the next line where that's blue and then black again, and then black to red, and then red to black. So that the idea is the color matching allows your eyes to track better. Supposedly they say it can assist students who have dyslexia, it can improve reading speed, things like that. There's different sort of variants you can use on it. So again, just one of the things when you're talking about accessibility and making sure that the digital environment is as open and accessible as possible for everyone, to consider. That it was new to me when I heard about it, so I try to make sure I point that out to anyone I can. And I'll grab this so I can share that. Yeah, but I guess like, where are your pain points, your concerns, your issues? Again, anything I didn't touch on that you'd like to discuss?
Well, Mike, thank you very much for the presentation. What I've understood so far is the fact that we have various methods as far as technology is concerned to deliver online courses, online lectures. But one thing is very common, especially when it comes to a Cameroon setting, Cameroonian setting. From the look of everything, instructor needs to have a mastery most of this technology, and so that you can be able to use the one that works for you. So far, I have been able to use Zoom and Flipgrid, but I don't know how the other ones work. So what I'm just saying is that it means we will have to explore all the other options and be able to use them. And the issue with internet bandwidth, it's actually a serious issue because maybe with our internet connectivity problems, it may not, some may not work. So what I'm just saying is that I don't know if we're going to learn about all the options available, or it is just left for us to do some kind of investigation or exploration and find out the one that we are more comfortable with and try to use it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I think that there are a lot of different options out there. I think you will need to do some exploring as to which ones will work and which ones won't. I think it's good to have options. I tried to think about products that can work in the cloud online as streaming, but then also have sort of a downloadable analog, because I understand that personally, one of the things I hate doing is reading on the screen. And so I like to print out things and actually have physical copies of stuff. So it's just one of those things that I'm definitely in favor of analog in that way. And I think the one thing you want to do is make sure that you don't have all your faculty doing wildly different things. You want to try and at least standardize on and say, okay, well, if we're going to package content, we're going to use these 3 different types because 90% of you can use those. So if you're the 10% who don't, like, pick one of these 3 so that way our students aren't, strolling through the Wild West and just kind of like anything goes. But yeah, that's, I've been at Drexel so long that it's sort of like everything's just there, and that sort of, there are so many choices now. It makes it difficult, but then it also sort of gives you a freedom of choice where, well, these ones are free and we could just use these, or if we have money to put towards it, this one is better in these ways, or it provides us these things. So it allows you to sort of make those. It's a bad thing to not have anything now, but it's good with the amount of choices that are out there these days.
I would love to share an experience that kind of supports what Niente said. Many years back, I think that was in 2005, when I just started working. We had students to supervise for their projects, and then they had to make a presentation before a panel. And I asked the students to use a PowerPoint. So there was a significant resistance from the faculty at the time. People could not use PowerPoint, and they said, no, we can't accept this. And they felt that it was going to be a disadvantage to the students they were supervising, because the students had been, prior to that time, using chats for their presentations. So PowerPoint was available, it was free, but the faculty didn't know how to use it. So they resisted, and we couldn't introduce that until a year later when we had some. So things like that happen. And I think one of the things we could achieve in this program is to help the administrators who are in this program to find a way, maybe with some kind of mentorship, to find a way to ease this into their system. What works for them, to help them to make those decisions and help them in that process, accompany them in that process. It would, if we can do this, Fran, it would really add value to this.
Yeah, I was just going to say 2 things. One, faculty pushback on technology is universal. So we have issues with buying at Drexel. So that's definitely, I understand that. I think 2, sort of what you want to do is present it in a way that makes it as palatable to the faculty as possible. To say, again, if you had sort of like a standalone module, one of the things that my team tries to do for the faculty at Drexel is say, you're faculty, you're there to teach, you're not tech support. And so if Fran and Dana need something like, hey, well, our students don't know how to use VoiceThread. Okay, well, my team will create materials that show you how to use VoiceThread. We'll leverage the vendor's support provided and put that all together as a package to say, we're going to take that burden off of you, and we'll make sure the students understand how to do this, and then they'll be successful. And then sort of, if you can show them the value add for them, the time it'll save, I think while also being transparent to say it's a change, so it'll be different. Again, I think it comes down to communication. And we're not always heard the way we think we are. I think when I'm presenting something, I think I'm presenting it one way and it's heard in a totally different way that I didn't understand, and then that's where we run into problems, which is why I try to say, here are the assumptions I'm making, based on this. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but it's the right thing to do, and here's how we'll sort of share that burden.
And that is so important, Michael. It is about communication, and the idea of your advice about selecting the best options, and the reasons for selecting it, because that's the role of then providing the tech support for it, so that you can take that burden away from the faculty, so it really is about having a strategic plan and how you're moving forward for what you want to have. You want to have some video assets, you want to have, live, meeting space, and you want to have content being deployed, so what are the tools that you're going to be using for those three main areas, is to be very strategic in how you're going to move forward. Now, I'm just going to put a plug in here. Next week, we're going to be talking about faculty development, because that dovetails so significantly with what the infrastructure supports are, and how you are planning for that development. So any other, we are almost out of time. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to ask their questions while we have our experts here. We haven't heard from Jeffrey, but I know he'll jump in if a question comes up that's for him.
Go ahead. You can ask your question.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk. As a matter of fact, I've been lost because I had some issues with my gadgets, but thank God I'm back and I've been able to grab a few things. I want to thank Dr. Frank for the wonderful work she's doing, especially taking time off her numerous activities to ensure that we carry the work out as it demands. We are so grateful, especially my institution, for having this opportunity. I pray that we'll be able to meet up with the expectations. Also, I would like to mention what Dr. Mabu said concerning introducing some technology like the PowerPoint issue which he raised. That has actually been, it appears to be a new phenomenon, and many people are resisting it, both students and the faculty. So if something is done to encourage us to do much.
So if around getting buy-in in general, again, I think it's key to know your audience, to know what will resonate with them, and to sort of front load any sort of presentation with, this is what the direction we want to go, and this is why we want to go there, and this is how it will benefit you, while again not leaving out, this is sort of the cost. So yeah, I apologize if I get this wrong. Akom?
Yes.
You had your hand raised. I didn't know if you had a question.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a worry at the level of synchronous sessions and asynchronous sessions. due to accessibility, availability, and usability of digital devices as well as bandwidth, synchronous sessions are becoming very difficult in our context in Cameroon. So for asynchronous sessions too, students as well as faculty are finding it difficult to manipulate these devices such that synchronous sessions will take place effectively and on time. Because of this, there is so much reliance on the asynchronous sessions, and sometimes the formal systems, for example, if your institution has adopted Google Classroom, you find that there is the tendency for both faculty and students to shift away from a formal platform of that nature to using social handles like WhatsApp, which are fairly accessible and are common. So in that situation, do you think it is not a best practice to use a social media for classroom sessions?
So I think it depends. I think given the technical limitations, you need to look outside the box of what you currently have. And it's just a matter of if someone's going to join a social media thing outside of the sanctioned school environment, you know, what sort of account are they using? How do you know that that's me that's joining that? There are some issues there. Yeah, I don't know if like using something like a text-based GroupMe or something like that, where everyone can start a sort of a class thread and then say, okay, well, we're gonna text chat about this. I don't know, again, in terms of bandwidth considerations, text chat drastically cuts down on that, but then it's sort of this, you can't see anyone, you're reading tone into what they're saying, which I think can be dangerous, again, in terms of miscommunication. So there's a lot of trade-offs there. Again, at Drexel, I'm encouraged to sort of do what needs to be done to solve issues and sort of think outside the box. So I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand. Again, I think you need to fully consider, you know, what are all the ramifications if we go this route? What do we gain? What do we lose? What's at risk? And I think, as it was brought up earlier, privacy and security needs to be sort of at the forefront in making those decisions.
Well, this is, thank you very much, Michael. This has been a very interesting discussion, and we will continue the discussion in the discussion forum as we start, you know, reflecting on the information that was provided today. That is significant food for thought as we move forward with, you know, being strategic about building a robust e-learning infrastructure. But the key thing to consider is that this is something that takes time to do, you know, so you know, it's a very important first step to start exploring these issues and start thinking about it, and then being strategic of how you're going to phase it in. So that's the focus right here. Now, I know that Michael and Jeffrey, I'm going to share your email contacts, you know, so that if questions come up that require the expertise that these two gentlemen have, and they do have expertise, I assure you, and I would encourage you to reach out to them with your question. So thank you again, Michael and Jeffrey, for being here and taking part of this, and thank you everybody for coming. Have a wonderful.
I was just going to say thank you for giving us the time. Again, I'm happy to follow up with anyone to go over any specifics, and if participation in the discussion board is appropriate, I can do it there as well.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording.